need to be heard. My voice actually matters. My ideas are worthy of being listened to. And so that really comes into play in even the most simple ideas of asking your kids what their opinions are and then following through with some of them. Not all of them. They don't rule the roost, but asking them, hey, I'm trying to come up with a dinner menu this week. What are some ideas you have? And maybe taking one or two of them, right? And then having them help you in the kitchen with that.
Hi, I'm Rachel Green, Brooklyn-based divorce mediator and collaborative attorney, and this is my podcast, Keep the Kids in Mind. Join me as I chat with other industry professionals about everything from smoothly navigating your way through divorce to prenups, all the while keeping the kids in mind. Hi, I'm Rachel Green. Welcome to Keep the Kids in Mind. Today we have a special guest. I'm pleased to introduce Nellie Harden. She is an author, speaker, and family and life leadership coach who focuses on helping parents to lead their teen and tween daughters in a way to teach them to love and lead themselves and build a strong foundation of worth, self-esteem, and confidence, all before they leave home. Welcome, Nellie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Great to meet you.
You too. You too.
So, please tell us all what drew you to this work and how you came to be doing the work that you do now with helping parents and children.
I think it was just my life fell into this work. As you know, you look back so many times, and if you're following your passions and purpose, that's where you land, right? And so I was a young woman myself. I'm still a young woman, but I was a younger woman way back when. And I left home at 17. I graduated early and I went off to college. And I didn't know it then, but looking back, I really wasn't equipped with a foundation to launch into this independent life with. And I moved 7 hours away from home when I was 17 and was dropped off with a cry and a wave and good luck to you. And when that happens, and so many young people, men and women, but especially women, when they're released out into the world without this foundation of worth, esteem, and confidence. And again, I did not have that language or knowledge back then, but I do now. When you are released out into the world without those, then you just start seeking them everywhere, especially that bottom platform of the foundation of worth. So you look for it and chase it down everywhere, and anyone or anything that is a sparkly object that might, make you elevate at all. You're like, oh, I want to chase that. I got to do that. I got to do that because I'm not worthy unless I achieve that, unless I have that title, unless I am that thing. And
well, interesting because my sister also left home at 17, similar to you. But my recollection is that when I was 15, I felt like an adult. I felt like I knew everything, and I didn't even want to hear what my parents had to say. And it just seemed normal. My sister was like off on her own. And I was like, good. I can't wait to get out in that big world. But you're right. Looking back, you go, oh my God, like, what did I do?
yeah, it's that inflated knowledge. It's that frontal lobe that is still very much under development. And it's, it doesn't fully cure, if you will, until around 25. And then there's, still slow changes that happen after that. But so, yeah, for myself and my own story, I started chasing worth in all these places, which led down some really, dark paths and difficult times that then led to decades of healing from that I still, deal with today. But in that time, over the last, few decades, I had 4 daughters. And so I have 4 daughters now that are 18, 16, 16, and 14. I have twins in the middle there. So we are very much in the thick of everything, adolescent young woman. But when having gone through and the experiences that I had, and then we almost lost my husband when my kids were 4 and under. And so it was just a real wake up call to look at them and say, okay, this might be all on me, but even if it's not, we have a very valuable priceless impact time that we can have with these kids, because after that, you are still their parent. You are still, a guide and a consultant, if you will. But there's nothing like the time period of what I call the 65-70, which is around 18 years and younger. There's never a time like that again, when the brain is under the development it is, when the knowledge and the thirst and the curiosity is in that place, when you are there every day or just about every day for guidance and consulting and structuring and molding, right? And so it really is this very precious time. And my background is in biology and psychology, and I went into animal work first, which I'm so grateful for, to see the black and white sans messy humanity. And then I got into, human work about almost 12 years ago now. And so I've been working in family work ever since, building this,
Well,
discovering
I
this
like
ever
that
since.
distinction, the animal work versus the human work.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Absolutely. It was really neat to see the black and white. Okay, what is the purpose of childhood before I got into the human work side of it? Because you really get to see, wait, the entire purpose, just biologically speaking, is to move them to a place that they can sustain and have success on their own in life, right? You need to teach them and build them throughout this childhood experience so that they can be successful and self-sustaining out in the world,
Right.
and then bring in the messy human.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like working with the animals allowed you to sort of tease out what is the biological function of,
Yeah.
of that learning period. Yeah, so that's so interesting. And do you work with the parents mostly, or the children, or both altogether, or?
So both. And so my program is built so there's 50 sessions in that, and 42 of them are for parents, 8 of them are specifically for the kids, because I worked with each one of them individually before. But here's the problem. You just work with the kid, or I'm sorry, you just work with the kids, and then they go home and it's not sustained in the home, right? Because the parents, who are the leaders of leading in the home, they aren't then bringing those
They aren't
principles
trained,
to
right? They don't
practice.
understand what the children are working on,
Exactly.
right?
But the opposite, if you're just working with parents, then they're bringing that home. And I don't know if I'm sure you know this, but all your listeners too, adolescents especially, but kids in general, don't always listen to their parents all the time.
I've never encountered that.
Shocking, I know. And so it's that principle of, the parent can say something over and over and over again till they're blue in the face, but somebody else comes in and says the same thing. And that child's all of a sudden like, oh, yeah, I get it. They said this. And the parent's there with the jaw dropped. And
Yeah,
so it's just this beautiful collaborative effort that comes together.
yeah. My daughters had that experience actually over the holidays. They were talking to some friends on Zoom who were out of town, and they ended up like having this long, deep conversation for like 3 hours. And they were talking about their relationship as sisters, and 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 my older daughter felt like she understood for the first time that my younger daughter like needs more independence.
Mm.
And my younger daughter later said to me, I've said that to her like, 50 times, and she just doesn't get it. And then when her friend said it, all of a sudden she went, oh, she needs more independence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, people have to be like ready to hear something at any age.
That is true. And it's timing on that part, but it's also this, you know, uh familiarity, right? It's like, I can't take you seriously. I've seen you get up in the
Right.
morning and, you're just a messy human like me, so I can't take you seriously.
Right.
And
And then when a third person who's not in the family says it, you just are like, oh, this is something that it is true outside of this house.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, so For teenage girls especially, it seems like there's some particular challenges that our society is presenting right now with social media and the images that are on television and in movies.
Yeah.
um they make girls question their self-worth. They it's over sexualized, in my opinion.
Hmm.
That girls are being taught tacitly, if not explicitly, to present themselves and their sexuality first above all other attributes. And how do you guide people through that morass?
It's not easy today. And the fact of the matter is, social media, the online community, that is not going away. And so we have to learn resilience within it to grow from there. But here's the beautiful thing is that self-worth has always been built on the same pillars for as long as messy humans have been around. And they're still there today. We just need to look at them with the different perspectives of the challenges we face today. So, the pillars of self worth that we really need to be in open communication with our kids about, especially our daughters, is that they need to know that they're seen. Okay, so look at what's happening on social media, right? Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. How many likes do I have? Oh, I didn't get enough. Oh, they left me on red. Oh, I was delivered, right? They are so hungry to be seen, and they feel like this is the avenue it has to happen in because they were born in an era when this was already happening if you have an adolescent now, right? You did not grow up with cell phones in our hands, right?
We did not.
No. And so it's very interesting to see what the avenue that they think is the only way to get that seeing today is, but it's not, right? So having a lot of those open conversations about that. So that's one of the first pillars is I need to be seen. Another pillar is I need to be heard, right? My voice actually matters. My ideas are worthy of being listened to, right? And so that really comes into play in even the most simple ideas of asking your kids what their opinions are and then following through with some of them. Not all of them, they don't
Yeah,
rule the roost, right? But
right.
asking them, hey, I'm trying to come up with a dinner menu this week. What are some ideas you have? And maybe taking one or two of them, right? And then having them help you in the kitchen with that, right?
Yeah.
In a good
I
way.
mean, that's such a powerful thing to have children feel that they've been heard. I've done podcasts a couple of times with Rosalind Saduka, um, who is also a family coach, but she focuses on child-centered divorce and
Mm,
helping children through divorce. And that's like the number one tool is to just ask your children, what do they think? If you're negotiating with your soon-to-be ex about the children's schedule, well, you can ask them what they think, even if they're young children. They may have
yes.
an opinion. They may say, I want to see you and I also want to see daddy. And that's like such an important thing for them to say and
Yeah.
to feel heard about. Um, so that's very powerful at any age, it seems.
It is at any age. And so one of the there's a family, a situation that we're dealing with too that there is the parents have to be separated from the kids right now and the kids are young. I'm talking like 9 months and about 20 months, okay?
Oh,
But
really?
even that 20-month-old, okay, just looking her in the eye and saying, what do you want right now? Are you okay? Right? She's not going to be able to verbally answer and get back to you, but she will know that, hold on, I'm actually being taken seriously and I matter, right? I matter to this person.
And
And
listening is one of the, as you said, the pillars of self-esteem.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Right.
And, when my husband was, I mentioned earlier, he was really sick. So my kids were 4, 2, 2, and newborn when
Right.
he
Oh,
had
what a
heart
heartbreak.
surgery.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And throughout that process, because he was really sick for about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And during that process, we had to have hard conversations with our kids. We would have to go to hospitals. They would have to see, daddy getting injections, all of these different things. And we had to have those real conversations. It wasn't this type of thing where, oh, we're the adults, we deal with this and put the kids in the other room so they don't know what's happening.
But I think there are a lot of families that would have approached it that way.
Yeah, no, I
And, yeah,
agree.
and the kids still know that something's
Yes.
going on. They're so aware of it. It's almost like gaslighting them. When you
Yes,
say, no, everything's fine, they know it's not.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so sitting there and just asking what they have to say. Do you have any questions? Even my twin 2-year-olds at the time, right? Do you have any questions for daddy? And, my 4-year-old, she became such a helper to me because he couldn't, go up and down stairs at the time and everything. We really worked together as a team. And that's the way I look at a family. We are a team. And that is true for divorced or not. We are a team that are raising up these humans. I call parents architects for a reason. We are planning, designing, and building the beginning of someone else's life. That is
Right.
a humbling, joyous, difficult responsibility that we
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And so for divorced couples or couples that are together or blended families, that really requires coming together as a team and setting aside some of the, personal differences in order to create unity for the kids.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Mm.
beautifully said. So,
But a couple of the other, pillars we
pillars.
have seen
Right.
and
I'm writing
heard.
them down. I want you to know. Pillars of self-esteem. Yeah.
Yes.
Seen and heard. Right.
Yep. So we have seen and heard, and then they need to know that they're loved, right? How do you show that love? You show that love by not flying off the handle, right? By being peaceful, by being calm, by being accountable to your actions. I do not call parents to be perfection. I am certainly not perfection. And I think that's really a dangerous place for parents to try to be. And I notice in families that I've worked with and talked with that are in divorce situations, each parent is trying to play many times their own perfection card, right? When you come over here, everything is going to be perfect and we're going to do this and I'm going to give you this, right? But being messy, we need to teach them how to be accountable to themselves too, right? I messed up right here. I really shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry I snapped at you. Next time, this is how I can do it better. Can you forgive me? Right?
I mean, that is so powerful because children mess up too. And
Yeah.
to model apologizing, I think is so powerful.
Yeah.
And even though little kids especially don't want to think that their parents make mistakes, but at the same time, all of us make mistakes. And learning that as you're growing up maybe will give you a path toward forgiving yourself when you make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And then that is, of course, not being able to give yourself and feeling like you need to be perfect is one of the things that triggers depression.
Yep.
I mean, so there's all kinds of problems that could be solved by people apologizing. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
There are so many kids that grow up that never hear their parents say, I'm sorry. Even for the slightest thing like bumping into them in front of the refrigerator, right?
Right.
Or, it's such an authoritarian, like, get out of my way, I'm the leader of, the family, instead of, oh, I'm so sorry. But then what happens the next day when they're in a restaurant and they accidentally bump into a waitress or a waiter, right? They all of a sudden, they're the transference of, oh, I'm an authority here, right? So get out of my way. Everything we do is modeled. Everything we do. And it's so much more than of what we do than what we say. What we
Right.
say matters, but what we do is what is seen and on display all the time.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think my father did not have the words "I'm sorry" in his vocabulary. But later in life, he found them. So I was
Mm,
lucky enough to be able to go through that with him, and then as an adult, talk to him about my childhood and have him actually apologize for some things that
mm,
he looks back on and regrets, which was very moving. So
it is.
yeah,
And that's why I say it is never, ever too late because I hear stories like that and I've experienced some things like that, and it is never too late. But here's the thing. during that molding process of the childhood journey of the 65-70, and really it's between 65-70 and 91-25, which is 25 years, that children usually go off into the world, right? And that's also the 91-25 is when the brain is, that frontal lobe is fully functional. They understand cause and effect. And if I do this, this will happen, critical thinking, all of that.
By 95-25, did you say? What?
91-25. Yeah.
Right. What are those numbers referring to?
So 65-70 is 18 years. That's how many days are in 18 years.
I
And
see.
91-25 is how many days are in 25 years.
I see. Okay, thank
So
you.
yeah,
Missed
it's
that.
really about, and again, especially the 65-70, that first 18 years of life, it's about showing up every day intentionally. You're going to mess up, and that is okay. And big things are going to happen. Trauma is going to happen. Everybody, if they're blessed with enough years on this planet, they're going to have trauma, some kind of
Yeah,
trauma in their life.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how will they get through that though, right? What will they be equipped with? Will they have their worth? Will they have their esteem, which is value and appreciation of self? And will they have the confidence? I truly believe in myself that I can see this bridge, figure out a way to get over it and get to the other side, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what those numbers stand for.
Okay. All right. So you said there's 4 pillars of self-esteem.
There's 5. So
Okay.
seen,
Need to
heard,
see, heard,
loved.
loved.
And then belong is the next one. They need to know that they truly belong somewhere. And I'm going to really, this is a big challenge for kids in divorce situations
Mm,
because they feel like they are a tennis ball going back and forth. Some parts of them are here, some parts of them are there. You know, and I'm not saying it's for everybody, but I saw something the other day that I had never seen before. And it was a divorced family that had one home that the kids grew up in. And it was the parents that switched out every,
all that, right. They call that nesting.
it was amazing. I was like, that's
Some families do.
genius.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, just amazing. And yes, it gets super complicated. Divorce is super complicated, right? But anyway, and it doesn't fit for everybody, but I just saw that the other day and I was like, that is so genius. The kids have a continuity in their lives,
Yeah.
right?
It puts the burden on the parents. The
It
parents
does.
who chose this as opposed to the children who didn't choose it.
Right.
Thrust into it, and it kind of makes the parents have to go back and forth.
Right.
It works best in a community where the real estate is not as expensive as it is in New York.
Yes. Oh,
So
sure.
that, it works best if they can afford to have 3 homes, like
Yeah.
one home that the mom lives in when she's not with the kids, and the other home the dad lives in when he's not with the kids. And
Right.
then they come and go, and then like kids have their own home. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are other ways that parents who are separating can form that feeling
Yes.
of community. I mean, one thing is if the parents are able to communicate just about the kids,
Mm-hmm.
almost like, I mean, if they can transition to being business partners and,
Right.
shoot each other an email when something comes up or, or a text or, have regular communication that's scheduled. And then when, the kid goes from one parent to the other, and says, "Oh, I got an A on my science test," and then the other parent says, "Oh, yes, I know. Congratulations on getting that A. Your other parent told me about it." I think that builds a sense of community. To think we're still a family. You're still my 2 parents. You're communicating about me. You're together, coming together to like give me a foundation and you're there as an entity taking care of me, both of you.
Yes.
Fascinating. Yeah.
I think that is amazing and ideal. Unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work that way, but if parents can get to a place that they can do that, and I love how you put it, to, just treat each other as, as business partners. What your business is, the kids, you absolutely love and adore, have passion, for that purpose right there. But together, the two of you are just business partners doing that. And I think that's such a beautiful way, and a
I like
functional
the
way.
idea, right? And I like this idea of the days. You only have to coordinate for 9,520 days, and you'll be done.
Yeah, so true. So true. Sans weddings and all of that in the future. So yeah, so that sense of belonging and really, having a place for them in both
Yeah,
homes, not a couch, that they're on in one, but a bedroom that they have in another. And it can get complicated, but just making sure that they have a place to belong, and more so than a place, a relationship to belong to with both parents.
yeah.
You, yeah.
I went to a seminar a few years ago where we had 10, 15, and 16-year-olds come in,
Mm.
and the person leading the seminar said, "Okay, you have a room full of mediators here. What would you wish your parents' mediator had known?"
Oh,
And the whole concept of having two homes came up. The kids brought it up, and the kids who felt like they had like even a couple of shelves where they could put their things and keep their things there, they felt like they had two homes.
yeah.
Even like, there's one kid who did sleep on a pull-out couch in the living room, but he had like a dedicated bookshelf that was just his,
Yeah.
and he felt like this is my space when I'm here. And it made a big difference as opposed to kids living out of a suitcase in one parent's home and now all their stuff is in the other parent's home. So
Absolutely.
parents can create that sense of belonging.
And this even goes to, and I say this because I have a freshman in college right now, this even goes to when your, child goes off to college. And of course, where they're at, that's a temporary space. Even though they live in it for a while, it's still a temporary space. They're reminded of it everywhere when they're asked, what's your permanent address, right? It's not where they are, it's where the home is. But when they move out and then all of a sudden you change their space or you take over their space, they can be caught in this weird limbo time too, which then leads down some downward spirals of this worth as well. And
Hmm.
so, just a side note, for anyone that has a college bound or a college student out there too, make sure that they still have a space. It's okay to change, a thing here or two, talk to them about it, and but make sure that they know that they have a place that they belong back in your home still.
That's so interesting because I'm working with a couple right now where they're in conflict over whether to sell the house, and the
Mm,
father has moved out, and and the two kids are in college.
hmm.
The youngest is a freshman, and the other's a junior, and the father's like, they're out, they're in college, they don't need the house, and the mother's been saying, no, he said to me, where am I going to go when I come home on breaks if you don't have the house? And she wants to keep the house at least another 2 years.
Yeah.
So what you're saying like is resonating to me, that I should, mention this, that like
Yeah.
it's a self-esteem thing if you take away their place of belonging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And until they have a permanent address that is somewhere else, you need to make sure that they have a place to belong in their permanent address. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. And the fifth
And
pillar.
the fifth one is purpose.
Purpose.
So, a purpose, it is something that they're moving toward. It could be small things like, next week I have a bio test, or it could be big things. I'm saving up for a missions trip to go somewhere, or I am working to become a lawyer or a doctor, or I don't know, a mechanic, whatever that is.
Or a
Just
coach or a mediator.
Yes, absolutely. Just something that they are moving toward. So they wake up in the morning with purpose in them. And then, you know, when we look at adolescents today, if you take and challenge me on this if you can or you think of one, but every single issue that I see out there with destructive behavior, destructive thought patterns, mental illness, I mean, there's biological entities of mental illness, of course,
Right.
but talking more psychological, it comes down to one or more of these that have not been fulfilled, especially in the 65, 70. I was having difficult decision or discussions just a couple of nights ago with parents who grew up not fulfilled in the 65, 70 with these 5 pillars of worth. And now they are raising kids who, guess what? They don't know how to fulfill these because they weren't fulfilled themselves. And so,
Right.
really working with those, right? And that's how this generational pain really starts just snowballing and getting bigger and broader as well
Yeah.
as generations grow. So, yes, those are the
This
5 pillars.
Yeah, and this is so great. I'm just finding myself wanting to go back to your story of your husband being sick and how you were open about that with your children so that they wouldn't feel like they were imagining something was happening and imagining, terrors that weren't real and not knowing what's real and I mean, that's so inspiring to me. And I see an analogy with that with divorcing families as well, because often, there has to be some belt tightening. And especially if you have teenagers, well, they can get a job scooping ice cream or flipping burgers,
Yeah.
and they can feel like, well, I'm able to help. Like my family is going through a difficult time right now, and we're restructuring, and we're going to be in 2 homes, and I'm not going to always be with my mom. I'm not going to always be with my dad. I'm always going to miss one of them. But where money is tight and they can't afford to give me allowance, so I'm going to go out and find my own allowance, and that can really make them feel like uh that they're able to pitch in, and it makes them feel like a sense more of control over their world, I think.
Yeah.
um
Absolutely. I always recommend as soon as kids can get a job, try to get a job. Of course, studies come first and anything else that needs to happen, but those summer times, idleness is not going to help anyone, right? When they're sitting around and they're just pondering and they're looking around and then you get
Being
the
around
I'm
on
bored.
right, and they're on Instagram, so that
Yes, yes, scrolling endless TikToks and snaps and whatever. And then, the comparison and perfectionism and identity shifting and all of that really starts coming into play as a product of idleness, right? And so, yeah, as soon as they can start waking up and having somebody else outside of the home rely on them too, right? Your boss is relying on you to show up to work, to do a good job when you come into work. You have responsibilities. And that's what we're building them for, is to get out there and, I don't think their life purpose is necessarily to flip burgers, but those disciplines that they get in that practice will have lifelong effects.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that, like, their boss needs them to have a sense of purpose and to work when they're at work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really great. So, like, what have you done with social media with your own children?
Boundaries. Boundaries. And so we have open communication with them, whether they want it or not. And, some have, some haven't, some were delayed. Some really just kind of saw, I see my friends on this and like addicted to it. I really don't want anything to do with it. And then I have, another that's like, oh, I really want it. And so in our home, right behind me, there's a green box right there. That's our phone box. And so every night at 6 o'clock, phones go in there. And then in the mornings, if they go to school, they have their phones at school because safety and all the things. But if it's not a school day, 11 a.m. is when they can get those out. And so 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. So they're not waking up to it. It's not waking up and seeing, oh, am I worthy today? Oh, what is the world saying about me today? Oh, what do I need to do today? And all the shoulds, right? I want them waking up to their real world. And so,
That's great. That's brilliant, because then they also, like, they're spending as much time without their phones as
yes,
with their phones, and it's just that would take away some of the power of feeling like my whole world is what people are saying on social media on the phone.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and this really came from years ago. I was sitting in this, I was mentoring this group of probably 20 to 25 middle and high school student girls. And we were going around and we were talking about the phones because we had just come from something. It was a camp that we were at where their phones had to be turned in. Well, after the camp was over, of course, they get their phones back. And we were talking, it was maybe a month or two after this camp. And they were like, it was so nice to be without our phones. And these are girls I see on their phones all the
All the
time,
time.
right?
It becomes a habit.
It does.
Yeah.
And they said, and so I really got curious about that. And I said, well, what do you mean? What boundaries do you have at home? And they're like, we have none. We have no boundaries at home. And so my notifications are going off at midnight, 2, 3 in the morning with things. And I have to look at it, because they all have FOMO, right? They
But
aren't turning off their
then they're
notifications.
not sleeping, which is
Then
so
they're not
important for
sleeping.
at
Exactly. And so they were so thirsty for good boundaries. And so I'm very fortunate that that was years ago before we got into this stage. And I was like, okay, these are the boundaries, we're putting in, and their phones are open to us. They are, if you have to keep something a secret, then there's a conversation that needs to be had. Right. And so their phones are open to us. They know their phones are open to us. So there's accountability there as well. And we've run into a few situations where conversations had to be had, and that was okay. And we got through those conversations and lessons were learned from it. And then 6 o'clock is when they all get turned in so that we have family time from 6 to 9. That's our family time every day. And sometimes we're off serving during that time. Sometimes we're home. Sometimes the kids have babysitting or something they're doing during that, but we are not on our devices during that time. And then, they go to bed after that, reading and what have you. So yeah, 11 to 6 are our time stamp boundaries on there. And then accountability boundaries are that it's all open.
Yeah, wow. Those are great guidelines. Um, so do you typically, so like, what is your typical client? Like, are they just any parents and teens, or um, do they usually self-refer, or do you work with schools, or how?
Um, all of the above.
All of the above, yeah.
All of the above. Schools, clubs, right? Or conferences or churches or anything like that. Building community, because every single child needs to have this foundation built in them. But what's beautiful is it's different for every child as well. It's like if you lined up 50 people and you gave them a, ball of clay and said, why don't you make a person out of this? Every single one of those is going to look different and unique to them and reflective of, them or what have you. But the material was the same and the instruction was the same, but how it comes out, because they're all individuals, is all very different. And each one of our children is very different. You can have the same two parents that are raising multiple kids, and every one of those kids is very, very different. I even have twins, and they are very different.
And having a different experience growing up too.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I've talked to my siblings about our parents when we were growing up, and it's it's always just a surprise. Like, it's like we had different parents.
Yeah, it's like, that's what you got out of that? That's not what
Right.
I got out of that.
Yeah, they were so different with me than they were with you, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, and discipline
delivery and
techniques.
the receipt are all
Yes.
different, right?
Yes. And each one of us has different learning styles. And so that means that there has to be different teaching styles as parents to each one of your kids. Like when something happens, when each one of my children are upset about something, and when you live in a household of 4 adolescent young women, there's always a fire of some kind happening, sometimes literally. And so, and so, but how each one of them is approached, like this one, you can't, do this with that one, but you can do this with that one. You need to do this and say this with that one. You need to go on a walk. Like, it's just different for every kid. So really taking time and investing in their time of the 65-70 is vital, so you can build connection. Because if you want clarity and a pass or a ticket to be able to be this architect in their life, which they need you to be, because if you're not, the internet will be, or their friend, or the person sitting next to them in chemistry class, or what have you. Someone and something is going to be an architect in their life, and you want to be that person. And so anyway, in order to get the freedom and the trust and the respect to be that person, you have to have connection and you have to have communication to get
Yeah.
to the clarity piece.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, I'm fascinated by this work, that you're able to distill it down to these 5 principles. I mean, it makes so much sense, and such a way to give guidance to young people and help them to, grow up to be whole and contributing and happy, satisfied adults. um, it's fantastic. And I was talking to a colleague this morning, and she said, "Oh, who's your guest today on your podcast?" And I described your bio to her, and she said, "Oh, I have a case. Ask her if she works with parents and children, because
Yeah.
this teenager is really having trouble. Her parents are divorcing. Her father won't go see any professionals.
Mm.
So, would you work with the mother and the daughter?"
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give her your contact information.
Wonderful.
And it's been really great to hear about your work. And I'm sure you're helping many families and teens through, and other age children through difficult times. And you seem to be walking the walk and talking the talk with your own kids. And I commend you for that. And it's been really fun talking to you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on here. And thank you for the work that you do.
Yes, we're all trying to help
Yeah.
families in transitions. So
Yes.
take care.
Thank you so much.